My name is Alara Vance. For the better part of a decade, my life has been one of quiet order, steeped in the scent of aging paper and leather bindings. As the lead archivist for the Port Blossom Historical Society, I find solace in the tangible echoes of the past, in the delicate cursive of a sea captain's log, the faded sepia of a photograph from the city's founding, the rustle of century-old blueprints. My world is one of careful preservation, of giving voice to stories that have long since fallen silent. It's a gentle, predictable existence, and until 3 years ago, I believed it was all I ever truly wanted. That changed the day Liam Connor walked into my archives. He wasn't a historian or a genealogist. He was an architect, the visionary behind the new civic wing of the museum. He had come to study the original building's plans, to understand its bones, as he put it. He moved with a quiet confidence, his hands tracing the old lines on the vellum with a reverence that resonated deep within me. He saw not just a building, but a living piece of history, and he spoke of his desire to create a new space that would whisper to, not shout over, the old one. I was drawn to the calm intensity in his eyes, the way his passion for form and function mirrored my own for story and substance. Our conversations started with architectural integrity and drifted into shared dreams. On our days off, we would leave the city's misty embrace and drive out to Whispering Pines Ridge, the evergreen-covered hillsides disappearing into the clouds. We'd have picnics at Crestwood Botanical Gardens, losing ourselves for hours among the riot of rhododendrons and ferns, the damp, earthy smell of the Pacific Northwest filling our lungs. Our love story wasn't a bonfire. It was a slow, warm ember, steadily glowing brighter against the backdrop of Port Blossom's soft, gray skies. About 6 months into our relationship, on a rain-slicked Tuesday night, Liam made tea. He set 2 steaming mugs on the small table in my apartment, his movements uncharacteristically hesitant. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic drumming of rain against the window panes. "There's something I should have told you sooner, Alara," he began, his gaze fixed on the swirling steam. "I don't want any shadows between us. I'm divorced." He looked up at me then, his expression a mixture of apology and apprehension. "Her name is Isabel." He told me a story of a whirlwind romance that had soured into something brittle and sad. He spoke with a quiet sorrow, not bitterness, and in his honesty, I felt the foundations of my trust in him solidify into something unshakable. He was not hiding a past, he was inviting me to understand it. His proposal came a year later, not with a grand gesture, but in a moment that was perfectly, wonderfully us. We were at the Mariner's Landing, walking along the waterfront as the ferries glided silently across the Puget Sound. He stopped and turned to me, the salty air whipping strands of hair across my face. He didn't get down on one knee. He just took both of my hands in his large, warm palms enveloping my own. "Let's build a future together, Alara," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's start our own story." Those words were the blueprints for the rest of my life. And now a new chapter was beginning, quite literally bursting into the world. I still remember that day so vividly. The soft, diffuse light of a Pacific Northwest spring was filtering through the large windows of the Evergreen Maternity Center. It was supposed to be just another Thursday. I was 39 weeks pregnant, a week shy of my due date, and on maternity leave. I'd spent the morning in the nursery, refolding tiny onesies and running my hands over the smooth, pale wood of the crib Liam had assembled with such meticulous care. That's when the first, sharp pain seized my abdomen, a sudden, fierce clenching that stole my breath. I gripped the edge of the changing table, my vision tunneling for a moment. Another wave followed, stronger this time. The baby was coming. Our baby. Everything after that is a blur of gentle urgency. The scent of sterile linens, the steady, reassuring beep of the fetal heart monitor, the waves of contractions, each one a tide pulling our daughter closer to shore. Liam rushed from a critical site meeting downtown, his face pale and his dark hair disheveled. He burst into the delivery room, still wearing his work trousers and a rumpled button-down shirt, his architect's scale peeking out of a pocket. I remember the warmth of his hand, large and calloused, holding mine. It was an anchor in the storm of sensation. Sweat beaded on his brow, and his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were filled with a profound mix of love and sheer, unadulterated terror. "It's all right, Ilara," he whispered, his voice a low rumble. "I'm here. We're in this together." 12 hours of labor felt like a lifetime and no time at all. Though I had spent years handling fragile, irreplaceable artifacts, nothing could have prepared me for the momentous, terrifying, beautiful experience of becoming a mother. Liam was my rock, breathing with me, murmuring words of encouragement that were a lifeline. "Almost there, my love. You're so strong. You can do this." And then, with one final, monumental push, our precious Willow was born a tiny, perfect, 6-pound miracle. The moment I heard her first cry, a sound more beautiful than any symphony, tears streamed down my face. They laid her on my chest, this warm, slippery, wriggling little person, and I was consumed by a love so vast and fierce it was overwhelming. I was her mother. It was my job, my privilege, to protect her forever. As her tiny, wrinkled fingers curled around mine, the reality of it settled into my bones. Her soft, milky scent, the feather-light weight of her against my skin, the rhythmic puff of her breath, every detail was a treasure I began to catalog and store in the archives of my heart. "We've been waiting for you, Willow," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. The next 3 days passed in a haze of blissful exhaustion. Our room at the maternity center became a sacred bubble. We learned the delicate art of swaddling, the patience of late-night feedings, the overwhelming joy of watching Willow's tiny chest rise and fall as she slept. Our apartment at the Hemlock Terrace was ready. The nursery was painted a soft sage green, the color of new spring leaves. The crib was waiting. Tiny, gender-neutral clothes were folded in the drawers. Sterilized bottles lined the kitchen counter. My heart swelled with anticipation for the quiet, ordinary life that awaited us. "Let's go home, my 2 girls," Liam said, his voice soft as he carefully secured Willow into her car seat and folded the stroller. As we stepped out of the hospital, the cool spring air of Port Blossom greeted us. The sky was a familiar shade of pearl gray, and a light mist hung in the air, making the evergreen trees in the distance look like watercolor paintings. It was 2 p.m. As Liam was loading our bags into the trunk of our car, his phone buzzed. His face tightened as he read the message. He turned to me, his expression etched with apology. "Ilara, I am so sorry. There's an emergency at the waterfront project. A load-bearing wall has shown some stress fractures. I have to go. I have to be there." He ran a hand through his hair, the picture of frustration. "I've called a car service for you. They'll be here any minute. Get home safely." He leaned in, giving me a quick, distracted kiss before pressing a tender one to Willow's downy head. Then, with a final, regretful glance, he hurried to his own car and drove away. A pang of disappointment, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through my postpartum haze. I wanted him to come home with us, to walk through our front door as a family of 3 for the first time. But I understood. His work was demanding, his integrity as an architect paramount. I pushed the feeling down. Minutes later, a sleek black town car pulled up. The driver, a kind-faced man with a neatly trimmed silver beard, got out to help me with the stroller and the car seat. "What a beautiful little one," he said, his voice a gentle baritone. "Congratulations, ma'am." "Thank you," I smiled, my heart warming at his kindness. "She's 3 days old." I settled into the plush leather of the back seat, gazing at Willow's serene, sleeping face. She was so peaceful, her tiny rosebud lips twitching in a dream. My angel. The familiar landmarks of Port Blossom slid past the rain-streaked window. The iconic spire of the old Smith Tower, the bustling stalls of Pike Place Market, the grand facade of the historical society where I worked. As we turned onto the tree-lined street that led to the Hemlock Terrace, a strange unease began to blossom in my chest. The building, a handsome brick structure from the 1920s, looked the same as always, its manicured gardens glistening with moisture. And yet, something felt off. "Are you feeling all right, ma'am?" the driver asked, catching my expression in the rearview mirror. "Yes, thank you." "Just tired," I replied, trying to convince myself as much as him. But the feeling persisted, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. "You take care now," the driver said warmly as he helped me onto the curb. I lifted the car seat, cradling Willow protectively. Her warmth was a small comfort against the sudden chill I felt. I walked under the familiar green awning and into the lobby. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It was a weekday afternoon. Usually, the lobby held the faint echoes of life: Mrs. Gable from Forby walking her terrier, the sound of the mail carrier's cart, the distant hum of the elevator. Today, there was nothing. I fumbled for my key fob to buzz myself through the second set of doors. I swiped it. Nothing. The small green light didn't flash. I tried again. Still nothing. I noticed the main security monitor behind the empty concierge desk was dark. A power issue, perhaps? I decided to use the main elevator. A small, neatly typed sign was taped to the polished brass doors, out of order. "We apologize for the inconvenience." This was strange. Our building manager, a meticulous man named Mr. Henderson, always sent out emails days in advance for any planned maintenance. His notices were printed on official letterhead, not on a stark white piece of paper that looked like it had come from an office printer. With a sigh, I headed for the fire stairs. As I pushed open the heavy door, the feeling of wrongness intensified. The concrete stairwell was cold and dim, the air thick and stagnant. My footsteps echoed unnervingly. Normally at this time of day, I'd hear the muffled sounds of life from the apartment's television, music, a snippet of conversation. Today, an unnerving silence pressed in from all sides. Just as I reached the landing between the first and second floors, Willow stirred and let out a soft whimper. I instinctively paused, shifting her weight in my arms and murmuring soothing words, patting her back gently. "Shh, little one, we're almost home." It was then that a prickle of ice traced its way up my spine. The distinct, unshakable sensation of being watched. My head snapped up. The landing above was cast in deep shadow, but I could have sworn I saw a flicker of movement, a shadow detaching itself from the others. I strained my eyes, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. There was no one there. Only the stark, geometric shadows cast by the high, grimy window. "It's just your imagination, Alara," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. Postpartum hormones, exhaustion, it had to be. But the fear felt primal, real. I took a deep breath and continued up to the second floor, my steps now hurried. The hallway leading to our apartment, number 212, was just as silent. That's when I saw it. A piece of white paper, taped to the dark wood of our front door. My first thought was that it was another notice from management. But as I drew closer, my blood ran cold. This was not a typed notice. It was a single sentence, handwritten in a shaky but clear black script. "Do not enter. I have called the police." The letters were stark against the white paper, the ink slightly bled, as if the writer's hand had been trembling with fear or urgency. Who? Why? My mind raced, unable to process the terrifying implications. At that exact moment, Willow, as if sensing the electric fear coursing through me, let out a piercing wail. Her cry shattered the oppressive silence, echoing down the empty hall. It made the nightmare real. My hands began to shake so violently I could barely hold the car seat. I needed my phone. I needed Liam. With my left arm hooked securely around the car seat, I fumbled in my coat pocket with my right hand. My fingers felt clumsy and disobedient. After what felt like an eternity, I pulled out my phone, nearly dropping it. My thumb slid uselessly across the screen. Finally, I managed to dial 911. A calm, professional voice answered. 911, what is your emergency? My apartment, I stammered, my voice a ragged whisper. There's a note on my door. It says to call the police. I have my baby with me, she's just a newborn. Suddenly, I heard a sound from inside our apartment. A soft thud, like something being knocked over. Was someone in there? My breath hitched. I flattened myself against the wall opposite our door, trying to make myself smaller, trying to shield Willow with my body. Her cries were growing more frantic. Ma'am, we have officers on the way. Can you tell me your address? As I gave the operator the address, another sound came from inside. Footsteps. A slow, shuffling sound. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. The fluorescent light above me flickered, casting long, dancing shadows down the hall. Just then, the door to the apartment next to ours, 214, creaked open. Mr. Alastair Finch, the retired literature professor who always greeted me with a courtly nod, peered out. His normally gentle, scholarly face was pale and drawn, his brow furrowed with a tension I had never seen. He was holding an old, heavy-looking fireplace poker, gripping it like a weapon. Ilara, he said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. Don't go in there. Get back. He stepped fully into the hallway. I wrote the note. I made the call. The distant wail of sirens, a sound I'd barely registered, was suddenly growing louder, closer. A wave of relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. I stood frozen beside Mr. Finch, clutching Willow to my chest as if she were a shield. Stay calm, my dear, he said, his voice retaining a professor's measured authority despite the circumstances. It will be all right. I will explain everything. Moments later, 2 uniformed police officers came pounding up the stairs, their radios crackling. A woman, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, took the lead. She had sharp, intelligent eyes that took in the entire scene in a single sweep. Me, a terrified new mother clutching my crying baby, Mr. Finch, an elderly man armed with a fireplace poker, the note on the door. I'm Detective Anya Sharma, she said, her voice calm but firm. Is everyone here safe? Alastair Finch, my neighbor said, stepping forward and lowering the poker. I live in 214. I'm the one who called. He gestured toward our door with a trembling hand. About an hour ago, I saw a woman I didn't recognize loitering in the hall. Something about her was unsettling. He chose his words with a scholar's precision. The woman, he explained, was tall and impeccably dressed in a designer coat, but her movements were erratic, her eyes possessing a feverish intensity. He had watched through his peephole as she'd tampered with the elevator controls and the security panel in the lobby. He'd seen her use a key to enter our apartment. It was the key that troubled me, Mr. Finch continued, his gaze meeting mine with deep apology. She had a key. I assumed she might be a relative. I hesitated. It's a terrible thing to admit, but I didn't want to interfere in a private matter. But the longer she was in there, I felt a profound sense of dread. As a student of literature, detective, one learns to recognize a tragedy in the making. I could not, in good conscience, do nothing. So I wrote the note, hoping Ilara would see it before she entered. Detective Sharma spoke quietly into her radio, requesting a tactical unit. She turned back to us, her expression softening as she looked at Willow, whose cries had subsided into exhausted hiccups. Let's get you and your little one somewhere safe. Mr. Finch, would you mind if Mrs. Vance waited in your apartment? As Mr. Finch ushered me into his book-lined living room, the comforting smell of old paper and pipe tobacco a strange contrast to the unfolding horror, I finally managed to call Liam. When I explained what was happening, the silence on the other end of the line was terrifying. I'm on my way, he finally said, his voice strained and tight with an emotion I couldn't decipher. From the window of Mr. Finch's apartment, I watched as a black van pulled up and a team of heavily armed officers in tactical gear swarmed into the building. They moved with a silent, terrifying efficiency. Detective Sharma knocked on Mr. Finch's door a few minutes later. "Mrs. Vance," she said gently, "we're about to enter the apartment. I need to ask you, is there anyone who might wish you or your family harm?" My mind went blank, then filled with a name. A ghost from Liam's past. His ex-wife. I heard myself say, the words feeling foreign and unreal. Isabel Sterling. Liam said she had some problems after the divorce. But that was years ago. We haven't heard from her in a long time. Just as the tactical team leader was about to use a master key on our door, a sound carried from within a low, crooning lullaby. It was horribly, chillingly off-key. The officers froze, exchanging grim looks. The leader gave a hand signal and they breached the door, swarming inside. There was a moment of silence, then a shrill, piercing scream from a woman who was not me. Then, a crash. We waited, the silence in the hallway stretching for an eternity. Finally, one of the tactical officers emerged, his face ashen. He spoke in a low voice to Detective Sharma, who then disappeared into my apartment. When she returned, her professional composure had been replaced by a look of profound disturbance. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "I've arranged for a car to take you and your daughter to a hotel for the night. The city will cover it. We need to process the scene. For your safety and for Willow's, you can't stay here tonight." A profound chill, colder than the misty Port Blossom air, settled deep in my bones. What had Isabel done to our home? What had she been planning? Mr. Finch placed a frail, comforting hand on my arm. "My wife will drive you, dear. We'll get in touch with Liam." As I stood, Willow stirring in my arms, I stared at the open door to my apartment. It was no longer my home. It was a crime scene, filled with uniformed strangers and the cold, bright flash of police cameras. The quiet, gentle life I had so eagerly anticipated felt as if it had shattered into a million pieces. "Liam," I whispered, his name a prayer on my lips. In a sterile, impersonal room at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, I stood by the window, rocking Willow and looking out at the glittering lights of downtown Port Blossom. The city I loved suddenly felt alien and threatening. The familiar gray sky no longer seemed comforting, but oppressive. A frantic knock on the door made me jump. I opened it to find Liam, his face a mask of anguish. His tie was gone, his shirt rumpled, and his eyes were wild with fear. He hadn't even stopped to grab a coat. "Alara?" "Willow," he breathed, pulling us into a fierce embrace. I could feel his body trembling against mine. "The police called me. They told me." "Isabel." His voice broke. Guilt and a deep, harrowing fear radiated from him. "Sit down, Liam," I said, my own voice sounding strangely calm. He sank onto the edge of the bed as I settled Willow, who was sleeping peacefully, into the hotel's portable crib. Liam buried his face in his hands. "I should have told you everything," he mumbled into his palms. "I was a coward. I wanted to protect you from it, but I just made it worse." What he told me next felt like something out of one of Mr. Finch's Gothic novels, not my life. Isabel and Liam's marriage, seemingly perfect on the outside, had been corroded from within by their struggle with infertility. After several devastating miscarriages, something inside Isabel had broken. She started having phantom pregnancies, Liam said, his voice raspy with remembered pain. Pseudocyesis, the doctors called it. She'd have all the symptoms, her body would change, she'd believe it with every fiber of her being. And each time the truth came out, she shattered a little more. The divorce came after the final, most severe episode, when Isabel had tried to snatch a baby from a stroller in a park, convinced it was hers. She'd received psychiatric care for a time, and then, about a year ago, she had simply vanished. "She started stalking me a few months back," Liam confessed, his eyes filled with shame. "Leaving strange gifts at my office, following me home. I hired a private investigator. I filed a report, but there was never enough for a restraining order. I didn't tell you because she'd never been violent, And I thought, I hoped she would just go away. And then when you got pregnant, he trailed off, unable to finish. The unspoken horror hung in the air between us. She knew about me. She knew about Willow. The hotel phone rang, its shrill sound slicing through the tense silence. It was Detective Sharma. "Mr. and Mrs. Connor," she said, her tone grave. "We have Isabel Sterling in custody. I think it's best if I come to you to explain what we found in your apartment." 30 minutes later, the detective sat opposite us in the stiff hotel armchairs. Her face was grim. "What we found was highly organized," she began, choosing her words with care. Miss Sterling had been planning this for some time. She slid her department-issued tablet across the coffee table. The first photo made me gasp. It was our bedroom. On our bed were dozens of our photos from our wedding, our travels, holidays. In every single one, my face had been meticulously, violently cut out. "It gets worse," Detective Sharma said softly. She swiped to the next photo. The nursery, our beautiful, serene, sage-green nursery. It was a scene of pure madness. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, in a collage of baby pictures clipped from magazines and downloaded from the internet. Hundreds of smiling, anonymous babies. And in the very center, taped over the spot where the mobile should have been, was a photo of me and Willow. A photo from the hospital. We believe she gained access to the maternity ward by posing as a florist's assistant, the detective explained. She was there, in the hospital, watching you. My stomach churned. The bile rose in my throat. Liam reached out and gripped my hand, his knuckles white. The final revelation was the most terrifying. In a designer diaper bag tucked inside the closet, they had found a complete abduction kit. Bundles of cash. A baby carrier. Bottles filled with formula. And 2 forged passports, one for a woman named Eleanor Vance, my name, and one for an infant girl named Lily. Not Willow. Lily. When my officers entered the apartment, Sharma said, her voice dropping, she was standing over the crib. She was holding a life-sized baby doll, wrapped in one of your daughter's blankets. She was singing to it. The detective took a deep breath. She screamed at my officers that they were mistaken. She kept saying, "This is my baby. Liam's baby. Her name is Lily, and she's finally home." We wouldn't be able to return to the apartment for days. It was an active crime scene. Isabel Sterling, her mind a labyrinth of grief and delusion, had turned our home, our sanctuary, into the setting for her own tragic fantasy. A soft whimper came from the crib. Willow was waking up, hungry. As I went to her, lifting her warm, tiny body into my arms, the terror began to recede, replaced by a wave of ferocious, protective love. I prepared a bottle, my hands moving with a steadiness that surprised me. The simple, domestic act was an anchor. The feel of Willow's small hand gripping my finger, her trusting gaze, the soft sounds of her suckling. This was real. This was my truth. Outside the window, the city lights blurred through my tears. Tears of fear, yes, but also of profound, overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude for a nosy, kind-hearted literature professor and his fireplace poker. For a calm, competent detective. For the simple, dumb luck that had kept my daughter safe. Liam came and knelt beside my chair, wrapping his arms around both of us. "I will never let anyone hurt you again, Alara," he vowed, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I swear it." In that sterile hotel room, amidst the wreckage of our sense of security, our family of 3 huddled together, a tiny island of warmth in a cold, frightening sea. A year has passed. The door to apartment 212 at the Hemlock Terrace is no longer a symbol of fear. It opens into a home filled with light and laughter. The sage-green nursery is now a playroom, joyfully cluttered with wooden blocks and soft stuffed animals. Willow, now a determined and curious toddler, has just taken her first steps, and my days are spent chasing her as she lurches gleefully from one piece of furniture to the next. In the evenings, when Liam comes home, her face lights up. "Da-da," she shrieks, her voice the most beautiful sound in the world. Having that as her first word is a source of endless, chest-puffing pride for Liam. The journey back to this place of peace was not easy. The first few months were a fog of trauma and anxiety. We both began seeing a therapist, a wonderfully compassionate woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, who guided us through the tangled landscape of our fear. In the quiet, safe space of her office, I learned to give voice to the nightmares. Liam learned to forgive himself for the secrets he'd kept. "You cannot rewrite the past," she told us in one session, "but you hold the pen for every page to come. Write a new chapter together." Our friendship with Alistair Finch and his wife, Eleanor, has become one of the pillars of our lives. Every Sunday, we have dinner in their apartment, the air thick with the smell of Eleanor's famous seafood chowder. Alistair reads stories to Willow, his sonorous voice bringing dragons and brave knights to life, and he and Liam talk for hours about history and design. My penchant for observing the narrative arcs of my neighbors finally paid off, he often says with a wry smile. "Eleanor just pats my hand." His nosiness saved a precious life. Detective Sharma, we call her Anya now, has become a friend as well. She drops by for coffee sometimes when her beat brings her nearby, and she always has a small gift for Willow, a tiny toy police car, a soft teddy bear, and a detective's trench coat. She was at Willow's first birthday party, a celebration that turned into a block party for our entire floor. The hallway that once echoed with my screams now rang with the sound of our neighbors' laughter. Isabel is in a long-term care facility, the state psychiatric hospital up north. The reports we receive from her doctors paint a sad, complicated picture of a woman lost in a world of her own making. They say her delusions persist, but that she is no longer a danger to anyone. Liam reads the reports with a heavy heart. "She's at peace, in her own way," he said once, his voice quiet. "She can't hurt anyone anymore." My anger towards her has long since faded, weathered by time into a profound, aching pity. She was a woman broken by a grief I can now, as a mother, begin to comprehend, even if I can never condone her actions. Sometimes, during the quiet moments of a Sunday service at the old downtown cathedral, I find myself saying a prayer for her. A prayer for a peace she may never find. It is the only compassion I can offer. And now a new life is quietly, miraculously, growing inside me. "You're going to be a big sister, sweet pea," I whisper to Willow, placing her small hand on my still flat stomach. She pats my belly with a curious expression, not understanding the momentous secret she is touching. Our family is expanding. Our story is continuing. Liam is already drawing up plans for how to convert his home office into a second nursery. We spend our evenings debating paint colors and names. "A boy, this time," he says, his eyes shining with hope. "A little brother for her to boss around. But boy or girl, it doesn't matter. This baby will be born into a world of love, protected by a family forged in crisis and tempered into something stronger than steel." This afternoon, as I watch Willow toddling around the living room, the late afternoon sun streams through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It's the same port blossom light, the same view of the misty evergreens, but my heart is filled with an entirely new spectrum of emotion. Not fear, but a deep, abiding gratitude. Not anxiety, but a quiet, joyful hope. Willow plops down on the floor with her favorite picture book, Goodnight Moon. She pats the page, babbling at the picture of the quiet old lady whispering, "Hush." I hear the familiar sounds of Liam in the kitchen, starting dinner. The scent of garlic and herbs fills our small apartment. It's the scent of home, the scent of our ordinary, beautiful, hard-won life. "Mama," Willow says, looking up at me, her face a perfect portrait of contentment. "I'm right here, my love," I say, scooping her into my arms and holding her tight. "I'm right here." Our story is far from over. There will be other challenges, other storms to weather. But as the gentle northwest rain begins to fall outside, tapping a soft rhythm on our window, I know, with a certainty that settles into the very marrow of my bones, that we will face it all together. Our foundation is strong. We are home,